What happens when two seasoned business leaders get together? They talk shop, of course. Sit back and listen in as Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso share from their experience around current issues facing executives, entrepreneurs, and their leadership teams. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey everybody, Vince Moiso here with the CEO Podcast. I'm here with Scott DeLong.
Hi everybody.
And we just finished up part one of a two-part episode. And we had the discussion because we had a listener that just asked the question, hey, if I've been this long time executive and I'm thinking about starting my own business and taking a leap to become an entrepreneur, where do I start? What questions should I ask? Who should I talk to? Those type of things. And I think, in that episode, Scott, we really focused on resources and where you...
Before making the decision.
Before making the decision, right?
Making the decision.
What do you do to help with the decision-making process of even taking that leap in the first place? And what we want to concentrate on for part two is, well, now you've made the decision.
Next steps. Right.
You're ready to take that jump, and what do you do next?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Well, so again, to answer to every good question is it depends, right? Are you jumping with both feet in?
Yeah.
Or are you jumping with the side hustle piece, right?
Yeah,
so your steps would probably be different for both. How much time, effort, energy, money that you're going to put into it would be different for both. So let's go with the hey, I'm going full bore. I'm dropping my regular job and we're going to go into start this business full time. I'm by myself. I'm a solopreneur. I can't afford, a staff right now. I've got to be everything. Right?
Yeah.
Let's start with that. So where do you start?
Yeah. So I think planning is number one. I mean, you just have to start there. And there's several different components to planning. I think where you start, which we even mentioned it in the previous episode, where I think you could, even before making the decision, you could do somewhat of a strategic planning session.
Right.
But I think that strategic planning session would be vetting out the venture.
Yeah.
Right.
The pros and cons and decide to go forward. Now we're going forward.
Yeah. So
now there's another planning session.
Yeah. Now you're going forward. And I think it's strategic plan session number 2, where you're actually saying, great, what are all the things that I have to have in place in order to move this thing forward? And so you've got to look out 1 year, 2 year, 3 years out and say, okay, great. I need to build a forecast on what that looks like. So what's my potential revenue going to be? What's that budget? Then you can reverse engineer that number and say, cool, what's the margin I need to have? What are my expenses going to be? Do I need to rent an office? Do I need to hire anybody? What is it that I'm going to do, right? And so you start to build out the semblance of really an overall business plan,
right?
But you've got to get down into the weeds. So you start with the end in mind, and then as you start to reverse engineer that out, you're going to really develop year one all the way to day one. Here are the action items that I need to put in place now so that I can get this business started. So it's that what I'd call, where do you start? I'd call that instrumental, critical, strategic plan session so that you're building out that first draft of a plan.
So here's an interesting question, because I've done it both ways. Do I get my customer first, or do I get my vendors first, the people that I need to get the supplies and the things from, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, I've done it both ways. There was one company that I started that I went and got a big office and got computers at 5 or 6 desks. It wasn't a big office. It was big for a solo person. And then I made a couple offers to have some friends come in and work with me. And we had no business at all, right? So here I am spending. But the mindset from that was build it and they will come.
Yeah.
Fine. So they came to get the paycheck. They came for that. The customers didn't come quite as quick in that mindset, right? But we worked on getting all the supplies and all the things that we needed to operate a business in place. And then there's other businesses in a consulting type world. Mm-hmm. Get the customer first, right? So I went and hit up current associates, friends and family, and the places you normally get your first customer, and get customers. But if you're talking about a manufacturing business, right, you can't just go get customers without having suppliers, can you?
Yeah, you sure can. I just don't live. I've never in my entire, entrepreneurial career, I've just never lived in a field of dreams type scenario.
I've done it twice. It both worked out, but I've done it twice. One way, one another.
I'm not saying I'm right. One way is right or wrong. I can only tell you where I've been, and I don't believe in if you build it, they will come. I just don't. I've always ran very customer centric. I think what a great problem to have. You go out and get the customers, you get a bunch of people interested in what it is you're going to do. Now you have the problem to build.
So that's say yes and figure it out model.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Hell yeah.
Okay. And I tend to agree. That worked out faster than the other way around.
What I've learned is the companies that have big problems are the ones that have an issue with getting sales. The companies that don't have a problem are the ones that don't have an issue with sales. Now, I'm not saying they all succeed, because some of them can't figure their shit out. So you can argue that, and I'm going to agree. I'm not going to say anything otherwise. What I'm saying is I'd always rather have the problem of having sales and having to figure out how the hell I'm going to fulfill.
Well, spoken from a true salesman. That's how a salesman thinks. Without customers,
For
you don't,
sure.
right? But the
For
operations guys say, but if I don't build anything, you can't sell anything, right? And the finance people say, if I don't finance that or have a way to bill and collect it, you guys are both out of business.
Hey man,
there's three.
Betamax was a great idea, man. It really was.
Yeah, the whole .com industry
it was
built
revolutionary
with the build it and they were come model too, and that didn't work out.
So was the
quite
laser
well.
disc, man. Yeah. I swear that those were state of the art,
yeah.
man. State of the art.
So you're saying customer first. Get someone that wants to be a customer or that's willing to be a customer.
Yeah.
Conditional.
Well, I think you have to have the target market. So let's go back to, you said, where do we start? Right. So we're starting with the strategic plan. We're building a plan, and you may not necessarily have to have customer in hand, but you got to have the target customer built out. You got to know who you're going to sell to and already have a plan. I think that's where you have to start.
Yep.
So you have to know what market you're going into, who you're going to sell to, and be uber focused on being able to deliver on that. Because then if you at least have that, you can start making calls, you can start promoting, you can do a lot of different things with that before you've ever even built a product or service.
Same model if you're going to be doing any social media advertising or any advertising at all. Understand who your customer is. In fact, when I was doing Lead to Goals, this company, I had a sheet of paper and there were 2 avatars, and actually your picture was on one of them. So you were the ideal customer for one of 2. And it was interesting because I was out to dinner with the other one, and you happened to show up at the restaurant, same restaurant.
Oh, I remember that.
Weird. And I just finished this document. I had his picture on there and all the characteristics of him and his company.
Yeah.
And I had your picture down there. So they had 2 different targets that had some intersection, but it was really interesting. But I get down to very specific what this person looks like even, right?
Yeah,
I can picture them in my mind, who that customer is.
The attributes, the
characteristics, what the industry, certainly, that's the big picture stuff. But then you get down to that target customer and what would interest that person, right? So before you start trying to spend any money on marketing, what's going to get their interest? What's going to get their attention?
Well, what if you have this product or idea? I know a lot of guys that are, that developed an app or, have some sort of product that they want to bring to market. And, so they've kind of already built it, right? Or at least built the idea. What do you say to that person?
So specifically in the app business, part of the course that we taught at Chapman Entrepreneur, we talked about getting wireframes of that app rather than doing all the work to get the perfect app delivered. Have a wireframe. Here's what it'll do. Here's a picture of what it'll do. Some snapshots. And what the thing will do, and then get that piece. Then see if you can get a customer interested. Great, that sounds good. Can you build it? Then you got to go back and start start the development process.
Well, yeah. So it's still
that.
customer centric in my mind,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
so you're still identifying and defining the target market, the customer that you want to sell to, the market that you're going to go after, whether that's geographical or whatever demographic or whatever that is. You have to have that lined up. And then I think you beta test it at that point.
Right.
You survey. You've got to get the feedback. And sometimes it's as easy as just getting organic feedback from the people around you. Just leverage your community and your network and say, hey, can I show you these wireframes of this app idea that I have? And can you give me your honest feedback? Or, subscribe to SurveyMonkey. It's really cheap for 3 months.
Or
and,
even your
send
friends
it out
that you think you might want to go to will have associates of theirs who aren't connected to you necessarily that you can get an introduction to. You're going to probably get better feedback from somebody once removed or twice removed from your friend. Your friend's not going to want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Right? They're not going to say, I don't think so. But they might introduce you to someone who will give you some very good feedback on the concept or the idea. And it doesn't have to be software. This wireframe concept doesn't have to be software.
Yeah,
It could be any product.
Yeah, for sure.
It could be any product.
Could be your website. I mean, could be whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to get feedback.
But testing the idea with real live potential customers or people that fit that market, fit that avatar that you've created.
Yeah.
Find those people and see if you can get some honest feedback and test the concept.
Completely agree.
Before you build it.
That's the way. That's the way to do it. Okay, so you've got the plan. We've got the plan in place at least the semblance of a rough draft of a plan.
2/3 of it. We haven't talked about the financing and the money portion of it yet.
Well, that's where I'm going.
Okay,
so
good.
we're, you and I are thinking the same way. So I'm asking the question. I'm begging the question at this point. What's next? And in my mind, you would immediately go into forecast mode. You've really got to build out a budget. And you've got to see what this venture is going to cost you. So let's just say we have a product or a service that we're starting a new business. I've got to figure out what the price is going to be. I've got to figure out the margin. I've got to figure out what my cost of goods sold or ultimately what my cost to operate this business is going to be. Because at the end of the day, I need to know, great, here's what I need to charge. So you might come up with what your cost is and you say, here's the margin that I want. This is what I need to charge. Well, you've got to vet out whether that's market price.
Will the market pay for that?
Will the market even pay for that? And so you have to understand that. So, I mean, if we take coaching as the example, right? So let's say, you're in a service business and you want to get into coaching or consulting. One is you have to realize, do you even have a market for that? Right. And who is your target market? Because you can't be everything. You can't be this all-encompassing coach, right? We just talked about that earlier.
We
right?
did.
And you can't be this all-encompassing coach. I mean, any more than, trying to compete with Walmart, for example, being everything to everybody is just, it's an impossible task. My point being is that, okay, great. You figure out what it is that you want to bring to market and you've got your customer in mind. Cool. Now you've built out this financial model and you've got the pricing. Well, you've got to do a competitive analysis. You've got to go out somehow into the marketplace. So again, tap in or leverage your network or find out, go online, do some research, whatever it is that you need to do the competitive analysis to figure out, well, if I want to charge $5,000 for a strategic plan session, am I competitive and will somebody actually pay that, right? Will the market that I'm trying to tap into, will they pay for that? Right. That is really, really important because if you can't hit the price point that you need to be at and be competitive within the market, I don't see how you're even going to launch.
So we've talked about building products, talking with customers. Then the third portion of that is understanding who the competitors are and what they're doing or what they're charging as well. And that's information that you're going to need. Like you said, you can't charge $5,000 for something somebody else is doing for everybody else is doing for $1,000. There's always going to be the guy that does the $1,000 deal.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
The chasing to the bottom kind of folks. But what are the majority of the people who are as qualified as I am charging for their services? And is there anything that I can do value add to get the price that I want?
Absolutely.
And will the customer pay for that value add?
Yeah.
Is it just me that thinks it's a value add, or does the customer believe it's a value add?
Yeah.
Right? So those are all questions that you get from other people.
Even more so for products, Scott. So I think if you're in the product market and you're going to sell an item, right? You know, take glass, for example,
Okay.
you know, it's like, okay, you have to be in the ballpark. You have to look at the competition and be able to say, yeah, I'm competitive on the marketplace and I can go capture new business. Essentially what you're doing I don't care what it is. I mean, there are rarely totally new ideas these days. So you're getting into a market, whatever it might be, that is likely to be a crowded space, right?
Sure.
So
But you don't want to just be me too.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. In
Yeah.
fact, what I'm saying is ultimately what you're looking at doing is taking market share.
Mhm.
So you're going to come in and you're going to take market share from somebody else. So it's not like there's all this business is not being tended to. It's just you're going to go take it from somebody else. In order to do that, exactly what you're alluding to is you have to have that value proposition.
Yeah.
You have to have that value add. So as I step back from all of this, so I think ultimately you've made the decision to make the move. You've done your initial planning. You've got this rough draft of a plan, right? You've done the financials and you've got a budget and you've got a forecast. Now let's take a step back. You got to come up with mission, vision, values. What's your value proposition?
Right.
You know, what are you going to go sell to somebody else? At the end of the day, I don't care if you're selling a product. I don't care if you're selling a service. You are selling yourself.
Right.
Either way. And so you want this long-term vision, right? This what I'd call a brand purpose or a blue sky vision. You want to have that in place. You want to have a mission. It needs to be concrete. Is like, I'm in this business because.
Well, so Simon Sinek and his famous
Start with why.
Start with the why, right?
Yeah. Great book, easy TED Talk.
Right. That would be a good place. Start with your why. What is your why? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
If you're doing this just to make a few bucks, if you're doing this just to get out of that job, if you're doing it just whatever, might not be enough.
Well, Simon Sinek says briefly, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Why you do it.
Right? And so his whole concept is start with why. So find your why, find your purpose. Why are you starting this business? Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to sell to that particular market? All those types of things. You can ask why on all those questions, and that'll get you to a point where you can develop what your brand purpose or your vision,
right.
even your mission, and then your values, which I think that arguably the values are the most important, because I think when somebody can relate to your values, both personal and professional, you're in alignment. And they're like, yeah, I want to do business with that.
I think even more than that, the values are important because they become your North Star. It is very easy to get sidetracked, chasing dollars, right? Hey, if you'll do this. Or I've seen so many instances where good people have gone bad because it's crossed that line just a little bit. Yeah. And once you cross it, then it's easier to cross it again and again and again and again. I was just talking to...
always come back to center, right?
I was just talking to someone that he was telling me that his company is probably got 30 or 60 days left. It's a $40 million a year organization, and they have $30 or $60 million left. So I'm asking the questions, obvious questions. Well, what's happening? What's going on? And it is and this situation happens to be a entrepreneur with a big heart, wanted to hire all his family and friends and make sure that they had a good living. And then he wanted a great lifestyle on top of that, not managing the cash flow, starting to rob Peter to pay Paul, and then going into the factoring business, and then double dipping and taking the customers' deposits and then selling the factor at the same time. And the deposits were just going to make, anyway, it's just a mess. This good-hearted human, I believe, is going to end up in jail based on the downward spiral, because he wasn't able to establish those values and stick with them. Those values are your guiding light. They are your North Star. They are we call them core values, because these are the things I'm going to do no matter what, even if I'm not crossing that line. And that has helped me so many times in my life. When they can fudge a little bit here and fudge a little, but once you start fudging, it's easier to fudge a little bit more. I think the values, yes, your customers are going to appreciate them, but if you use it as your guiding light, your North Star,
Well, let's be
they
clear.
are worth it.
Let's be clear what you're talking about here, Scott.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. And I agree with you. And, you know, I learned this a long time ago the hard way, because it is easy to veer.
Yeah.
It's very easy to veer off.
Somebody's willing to do
path.
something if I just that, right?
And don't think that the values you have for your business, if you don't believe in those values yourself, if they aren't your personal values, they don't work.
They have to be in alignment.
They have to be in total alignment.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from very, very personal experience in my previous business that they did not work, and it was just bullshit.
Yeah.
So ultimately the values for that business become bullshit. And here's the other thing I will tell you is your customer will see right through that.
The employees will see through it first. Customers will see through it next. You'll lose all credibility. If you put these words on your wall and you're not living them, people will see it and they will flee. Yeah. Well, they'll take your money first, then they'll flee. Right?
For sure.
They will get out of them. The authenticity.
Or it just becomes a top, you know, there are organizations that can survive that way and have survived that way, but they're toxic.
Yeah, eventually they fall in. Fell. They were doing pretty good.
Well, you know, I think what happens is those places become a revolving door, and they're just toxic. And so I look, this is Scott and I speaking, and I couldn't agree more with Scott. I think values are one of the most important things you could do in launching a business. If you don't, you know, again, you start with that planning we were talking about. Mm-hmm. You move into the financials and the budgetary item, and you're starting to identify the capital requirement within the business. And we said it in our previous podcast, however long you think that's going to take, double it. However much you think it's going to cost you, double that. But once you've reached that point, then I think taking that step back to really identify your purpose, the why, and develop those values within your business is going to go a long way. It's going to go a long way for you. And then ultimately, as you bring other people into the business, and understand that this is important both internally and externally. I think a lot of people misunderstand that values are this internal thing that, you know, it's for culture and company culture.
Which it is.
Yes. It is for company culture. It is for internal. It is also external. So we wear our values loud and proud. And we share those values with our customers, with our vendors, internally with our employees.
And it helps keep I'm saying it was easy that you could cross the line this time. If you have those values and they're that serious with your organization, now you start getting salespeople. What do salespeople like? They like sales. They like the commissions that go with sales. And if those values are maintained, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't let other people to change the values of the organization either. And I say hire for values. I can teach skills. We can teach skills.
Well, when we hire, my part of my interview process is to let people know. I ask what are your values? Do you have personal values? And then I let them know what our company values are, and I want to see if they're in alignment.
So, and I think that's the right order too. Ask what theirs are, and hopefully they're smart enough to go on your website and figure out what yours are, and then So I've had people gaming interviews that way, but asking what theirs are first before you share what yours are. Yeah. Because if they're not in alignment, it's a no-go right up front, right? So
and I say I follow up, you know, once I've mentioned what the values are, I'll follow up with, hey, and if those don't resonate with you, we're probably not for you.
Right. There'd be a better place for you.
We're probably not the right place. Yeah. So I think that's important, because you have to think with the future in mind. You have to think like, look, if I'm going to go out and get capital, for example, you need to be able to tell the story. Yeah. And part of that story is going to be the values and the mission and the culture that you're trying to create within your business.
If you're going to go out and get anything exterior, customers,
vendors, doesn't matter what it is. Whoever you're telling the story
same
to,
story.
Yeah, it's got to be that consistent
story.
You
will attract people, like Simon Sinek said, that follow your why. Right? Yeah. They're gonna buy your why.
They're gonna buy into why you do it.
Who you are. Yeah. Who you are as an individual, as a company. And you're right when you were saying that if your personal values are different than your company values,
doesn't work.
You're going to be a very unhappy person.
Doesn't work.
Right?
Yeah.
And you'll fail. both, right? So yeah, make sure that they're in alignment.
I'm going to say this one last thing, okay? And I learned this because I have to tell you that my marriage is the best that it's ever been. My family life is the best that it's ever been in this regard, because what I learned, and again learning the hard way, is I've completely my wife doesn't work in my business, but I've brought her into my business. She knows what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it. And, she travels with me. She's, those type of things. I think, I went a long time where I kept those things separate. That didn't work either. And I think if you've got
a lot of people say, I don't bring my work home. I'm sorry. Your work life is your life.
There's no checking it at the door. There just isn't. And the sooner, if you've made this leap, you've made the decision to start your own business and go the route of entrepreneurship, you need to understand there is no leaving that at the door. You can't walk into your house, think that you're going to sit down at the dinner table and you're just going to be able to forget about everything that's going on. Not going to happen.
Right.
And I think once I embraced that and I brought my family into that world and now it's one, it was the best thing I could have ever done. And I would give you that as almost a number one piece of advice is, so you've gotten this far, you've done your planning, you've done your mission, vision, values, you've done all this stuff. You got to bring those that you love and your support group, you've got to bring them into the fold, bring them into the mix.
Go back 2 weeks to the episode that we talked about, how do you make the first decision? My first answer was, you check at home first.
You check at home first.
You check at home first.
Yeah.
Before
you've gotten that far.
Right. And now
I'm assuming you've gotten that far. Now what you can't do, I guess the point that I'm making, and I heard that loud and clear and agree with it, the point that I'm making is that don't make the mistake of separating the two.
Yeah. And listen, the spouse doesn't need to know every detail of this or that, but generally bringing them into it's your life, right? You're bringing them into your life.
Yeah.
They're going to appreciate that.
I agree. I totally agree. All right. Last word.
It gets down into planning. It is before you spend a lot of time, money, resources. After you've made the decision, yes, I'm going forward. Now there's a whole secondary set of planning that you've got to do before you start signing contracts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
that's with customers, with vendors, with bankers, with lawyers, with all of those kind of places. Before you start signing contracts, make sure that you're teased. And it's not going to be perfect. Your first draft's not going to be perfect.
No,
right?
It won't.
You're going to go out and do some things, make some mistakes, learn from those and adjust and all of that. But what I'm suggesting is that the more you plan up front, the smoother the ride's going to. It will not be a smooth ride, but the smoother the ride's going to be.
No doubt. And you alluded to what I was going to say, Scott, which it is an iterative process. Yeah. It is a dynamic process. It is not static. Right. So you're going to build that first draft of a plan, and within 3 months, you're going to do another strategic plan session, and it's going to be different. That plan is going to build up different from where it started. And then you're going to get another 3 months in, and you're going to need to do the same thing. I mean, one thing I would tell you is be prepared to do strategic planning in your first year every quarter at a bare minimum.
I'm going to say most years, actually. So I like the yearly strategic plan.
Well,
even for mature companies.
That's what I do. But, I mean, we're you know how long I've been in business. And that's the way we got
a strategic plan, and I recommend monthly check-ins, quarterly revisions, and annual planning.
Well, you already know I do the 12-week year, so we're doing strategic planning every month, and so I'm not saying that that's for everybody. I'm simply saying at a bare minimum, expect that you're going to do it often, and
not by yourself,
and not
with your team, and hopefully with an outside advisor.
And you can change it. That's right. Ultimately what I'm bringing up is totally dynamic. You can change the plan, and you should be changing it. You should be adapting to what's happening to you in the moment.
So we talked about values a little bit, actually quite a bit during this one. That's the one thing I'm going to suggest that doesn't change very often are the values. Every once in a while there might be an adjustment, but I'm talking about every 5 years.
No, you should be able to dial that in.
Values are values. They are core values. They are, I'm going to do this even if, right? No matter what. So don't change those quarterly, monthly, yearly. but everything else can change, can and probably will change if you want to do this right.
Well, we thank you for listening. As always, this was a fun one, Scott.
Fun.
I enjoyed the second part, the follow-up. I think there's a lot of nuggets that you can take away in this one. So follow us on YouTube. You can watch us there. Please hit the subscribe button. Check us out on Spotify, on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, and all the regular channels. And you can always reach out to us at scottandvince@gmail.com. Check us out. It's the ceopodcast.net. We want your feedback, so
challenge
please,
ideas. Give us new topics that you want to hear about.
We want to hear from you.
Yeah, we want to hear from you. Really do.
All right, until next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. Please visit us at theceopodcast.net, where you can learn more about our co-hosts and listen to past episodes. If you would like to have a discussion and dive deeper into any topic, there is also an option to contact Scott or Vince to schedule some time with them. Thanks for listening.